I'm doing problem number 35 in chapter 13, bond funds. Morningstar selects mutual funds as medalist funds expected to perform well over the long term. You've decided to invest in a bond fund and plan to limit your choice of funds to Morningstar medalist funds. But now you must choose between a taxable fund and a municipal bond fund that is at least partially tax-free. Which is better? Here are the percent returns for the 3-year period leading up to the spring of 2013. So for this problem, we are going to be using the jump data table for bond funds right here. This is what you pull up first. So what we're going to do is make a fit y by x model for the data. So we're going to go analyze, fit y by x, and then bond is going to go for x. Oops, return's going to go for y, bond is going to go for x. Click OK. This is the data you get. So we're going to pull up some stuff right now, a bunch of data right now. This is for checking conditions. First thing we are going to pull up is we're going to mess with this data right here. So we're going to go down to display options and add box plots. Then we're going to go down to display options and also add a few other things. Mean lines, display options, histograms, and display options, points jittered. Alright, so that gets that set up for us. We're also going to add means and standard deviation. We're going to compare the densities. We are going to also do the test for unequal variances right here. Okay, so the first thing the problem asks for is, write the null and alternative hypothesis. So I have written that right here. So the null right here is mu1 minus mu2 equals 0, and mu1 minus mu2 doesn't equal 0. And for that test, you have to make sure it is the same as, right here, your t-test. So we see here is taxable minus municipal, and we just want to make sure that aligns with the problem, but I'll get back to that later about how I got to using the t-test. The next important thing we do is to look for the conditions. So, the conditions are, the first thing we're looking at is the mean and standard. We're comparing means and comparing standard deviations. So we see that the means are relatively close, but there's a lot of room in the box plots here and in the standard deviation here, which means there's a lot of spread in the taxable. Next we're going to look, so we just have to keep that in mind. Next we're going to look at histograms. We see that this is normal, and then we can kind of see that this one's normal, but it might be a little questionable. Next we look at the box plots. These are mostly for looking at outliers. They are a good judge for that. So we can see this one has kind of some extreme outliers, and this one has a few right here and right here. The next test we do is normality. So we're going to go analyze distribution. For the normality test, we're going to do return for y, bond for y. And to make this data more clear, we're going to click stack. And then I'm going to hold down command while I do this to find for the normality test, because it'll pop up for both of these right here. Command, goodness of it. So for the normality test, we see these are the p-values right here. We see they are both greater than the significance level of 0.05, which means we are going to assume that the models are normal. Next test is for unequal variances, and I already pulled that down right here from the hotspot. Test that variances are equal. We're going to look at the Levine row, and then we see that the p-value is 0.0018, which means we cannot assume the variances are equal. We reject the null hypothesis that we assume the variances are equal. Alright, so that should cover all the conditions. The next thing this problem is asking for is to test the hypothesis and find the p-value. So the hypothesis test, which I showed you, is what we're testing. And now we have to find the p-value, which I have right here. But the way to find the p-value is because we know that they're unequal variances, so that's why we use the t-test. Is t-test right here, it says assumes unequal variances. And that's where we're pulling the p-value from. So since it's not equal to, we're looking at this row right here, and we see 0.3225 is our p-value. So when we come back to this, since it's a high p-value, we're going to retain the null. We cannot conclude that taxable or municipal funds are different from one another. And I'm also going to include, before I end this video, all my conditions right here, just in case you missed any of them.